One other thing that I wanted to mention is normally on this slide, I'd be talking about all the great ways that you can access this information from PowerShell and automate all these reports and export them out to spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. I couldn't find any way.
Let me guess. Unlocking more weight.
Whoa! I couldn't find any way to do that with PowerShell, so I'm very remiss. I had to talk about the UI, which kind of hurt my heart a little bit.
All right, let's get going then. All right, everybody, welcome to Ask and Praxis. It's September 3rd. Happy Labor Day for those United States attendees. And we are going to talk about SharePoint site and page analytics for the site owner. And we have the gang all here. We're all back from our long weekend, and so we're ready to go. And what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about analytics all over Microsoft 365. So we're going to start by talking about page analytics, what they are, who can see them, site usage for pages, lists, libraries, documents, device types, all of those things. And then we'll sort of ramp it up and talk about tenant usage for a cross-site sort of metrics. And what do they tell you? What actions can you take from them? And then we'll sort of end on like the Viva Amplify area of this, which takes that whole metrics thing up another notch. So moving in, Patrick, you're going to get us started on page analytics.
So yeah, I mean, I think most of us consultants routinely get the question, you know, how do we know if what we're putting out there is what we want, or the adverse or the flip side of that, which is I want to put this out there because I think it's important. So, you know, tell me that it is. So one of the nice things is out of the box, you can easily get some basic information about your pages. You can view the information on how the users are interacting with it for both pages and news posts. You can watch it over a 7, 30, or 90-day period. You can see the average time spent on it. So is someone just hitting the page? Are they actually looking at it a little longer and kind of taking in the content that's on the page, or are they just looking at it for 30 seconds and going, oh my God, this is too much, I can't do it. And you can also see when people look at it. So you can kind of see if it's like they're checking the news first thing in the morning, maybe the internet homepage, or other specific pages that you didn't expect people to look at, but that now that you have these analytics, you can kind of be like, oh, I didn't expect that. I know for me, I use this a lot, or recommend it specifically for kind of those top tier quick links for people to swap out, kind of those top hit items. Because when you initially create a site, you might be, or a page, you might be like, these are what's most important. Well, they could be today. A month from now, they might not be. There could be some other things that are pulling people's interest. So it's a good way to get people in the habit of checking that, and then being able to update their content on their page to make sure that it's staying fresh and relevant to what people are actually looking for. One thing I did want to just note here is that while you do have the stats, and we'll look at a sample in a second here, you kind of have 3 different sections to look at, and you have to select the 7, 30, or 90 days for each one. You can't do it independently, which kind of stinks, because if you're not paying attention, you might switch to 30 for one and stay on 7 for the other 2, and all of a sudden things aren't making sense, and it's not giving you a true representation of what your analytics are.
Probably not the best user interface. We have some visuals here on this one.
So getting to your analytics is very easy. You can select the analytics button at the top of the page. And then on the 2 screenshots here, we have one showing you the 7-day and then one showing you the 30-day views of the same page to kind of get you an idea of how they can change. So, you know, you can see how it was used in the first 7 days. There was a lot, and then it kind of goes up and down for page views, as well as the time spent on the page and the page traffic by time. Now, I did realize, page traffic by time here is a little skewed because I took these in GMT for a company that is in Mountain Time. So everything looks like it's a little off.
Well, the nice thing about that page traffic by time too is if you have information you're trying to get people to read, like if you're updating like news or timeliness or whatever, this is sort of like what we get for the intranet if we're trying to post to social media or whatever, knowing what time of day that we can post something to try to get the most eyes on it. Can be helpful to have all this, data. But I can see what you mean about the graphs, because those little pickers up at the top are so like, okay, did we get them all? Like, it really should be, let's change the whole view for the whole page. So that's
exactly.
kind of a bummer. Casper, you had a comment?
Yeah, is it possible to see it by geographic distribution? So if you have a global company, 9 o'clock my time is not 9 o'clock your time. So
this is actually a snapshot. Patrick, I swapped these out. This is from a company where I'm in the time zone where that company exists, and it tends to show the times that people really do work. So if you have a global company, you might see that skewed out across that graph more. I don't think it has anything to do with work time or whatever. It's actual time spent.
Right, but the page traffic by time of day.
Yeah, in the traffic, the traffic is shown. Yeah. Sorry, the point was, which I was missing, is that it's shown in the viewer's time. So if somebody in this company happened to be looking at things at midnight at my time, that's where it would show up.
Right. Super valid. All right, so let's see. Moving on.
Yeah, we do just want to call special kind of attention to news posts. Because I think this is one of those areas where, the news web part really comes in handy, because you can get the same type of information. You can look at it to see if your newsletter is getting the right attention. You can look at it to see if the specific message you wanted to get out to the whole organization is actually reaching those people, or if only half of them are glancing at it or a quarter are looking at it. It's a good way to kind of look at it and see if there's a way that you might be able to change it up. Maybe it's the graphic, maybe it's a little tagline, depending on what your news web part is showing, what view you are selecting. And you can adjust the content strategy based on that. Maybe it is something as simple as the CEO newsletter isn't really being seen, so maybe you put it on its own site and then make it an organizational news site, so it comes in with a little special logo on it. So then all of a sudden it says, from the desk of the CEO. Maybe that's enough to draw people's attention to it.
And you could test those scenarios out too.
Exactly, and I was just going to hit on that. So you can also identify which posts are getting the most attention and kind of see if there's something you might be able to pull from those that can get that more important information in front of people and get them to actually click on it and view it. So I think for news in particular, it is really helpful from a communication point of view.
I think that little thing that's highlighted in the top of that screenshot is important too. For news posts, you can get additional information if it's sent out through email that you don't get with page views. Leave it to you to read what it says.
When you can see it on a better screen. One thing I wanted to point out, somebody in the chat mentioned Microsoft Clarity, and I'm not super familiar with it, so I don't want to speak about it particularly, but clicking on a link, looking at it quickly, it looks like it is sort of page analytics or very similar to like a Google Analytics. And we don't have it here and we're not talking about it here, but one of the ways that we tend to do extensibility and have done extensibility over time for even back in the on-prem days was embedding Google Analytics in all the SharePoint pages by using a custom script injection type of solution when we were on Classic. And when we moved to Modern and we're on SharePoint Online, the answer to that was SharePoint Framework Application Customizers. You'd get people coming to you being like, oh, I want to embed Google Analytics and everything. And I always wondered about that question, or asked that question. It was like, well, why aren't we trying to use like Azure App Insights, which is the equivalent of Google Analytics and has the sort of same thing. And it looks like what's nice about Clarity is that it's sort of an easy way without having to have a pro dev person to be able to get that type of analytics into your solution. I definitely see some chat here. Some people have done it and are clearly getting some benefits out of it. So it's going to be more elevated analytics than you're going to get with the out of the box that we're talking about here today. All right, let's move on to who can see them. Carrie.
Yeah, so basically everybody can see some analytics, maybe not all, but site visitors with just read access can see some basic things like the page views and the number of unique viewers and things like that. So if you're a site visitor, you can, get this information and just kind of get some visibility into the page as someone consuming that content, right? It's not going to be as deep as some of the other ones, but you get a flavor for kind of those numbers. Like obviously, like admins and owners and members who have editability would have a little bit more information at their fingertips, right? And this is just because they're looking at it from the perspective of someone who's creating that content and potentially wants to glean that insight to improve it, maybe make some changes with layouts and things to maybe improve some of that visibility. So, admins, owners, and members can view those analytics and even view a little bit more than a site visitor would. And then because, that's part of their task, right, to basically improve those things and look at that information and do some analysis on it, they have some additional capabilities that visitors wouldn't have. So exporting the data for some further analysis might be something that they want to do. Looking at some of the file activity or the trends, like the times when people are looking at things like we talked about, what files are getting the most activity, things like that are very helpful. And also those sharing reports, who has this information. There's also some other more specific like admin level things that admins can run to get a little deeper, but those are all things that are very helpful. And then this second to last bullet is really about being able to see who actually has viewed files and pages, which seems a little weird to be able to get to that level of information, but it's not sort of out of the box. There are a few specific features and settings that have to happen in order for that to happen. And I know Todd's going to talk a little bit more about that, but admins, owners, and members can even get down to that level if they wanted to. And then
I think it's important too. It's important for them to be able to get to that information in some certain scenarios. So it's good to be able to do it.
And it's not visible everywhere. Like those really specific details don't show up in a lot of like site usage reports and things, but you can see some of that in the hover cards over files or over pages where you can kind of see those individual usernames for specific things. So it's not everywhere, but it does give you a next level down information. Yep. And then this last bullet is, and I didn't realize this, but guest and like external users do not have access to those page analytics. And I would think site analytics, probably site usage reports also. So they actually don't have any insight into that.
And another point about exporting data, because one of the things with the reports is you only get 90 days of data and it's rolling 90.
Julie's not rolling anymore, though.
No, we've lost Julie.
I thought that was my end.
No, it's me. Yep. All right, I'm back.
back.
All I was saying is that exporting data, you only have 90 days of data. And so if you want longer than that, it's a rolling 90 days. And so that being able to export the data gives you that ability to congregate data or, collect data over time, store it, and then aggregate from multiple years. Sure. All right, let's move on.
So I cover, that's me. So also in the end user experience, and Carrie and I kind of are doing the same bits here. There's a site admin usage thing, so you can go into the gear and go to site analytics. I can't read it from there. Site usage.
Site usage.
There we go. Got my readers on. Can't see anything. And this kind of aggregates all of the things that have come before it. So it's got the page usage stuff, it's got the news, and it's got the document stuff, but it's got it all in one spot. It's got the, so it's going to look very familiar if you've got users who are used to going to one spot. When you see this, it's all the same technology. This also gives you like unique users per page, things like that. So more of this, being able to find out who's hitting stuff, how often they're hitting it, how long they're staying, if they're actually soaking up the data, stuff like that. A couple of things that I wanted to bring out on this particular page is there's some hidden gems at the bottom, and that's that right-hand picture there. One of them is what platform people are hitting your site with. So this is less interesting now because the pages are, they're modern, so you don't have to go out of your way to make them look good on phones or tablets. So it's kind of less of a big deal than it was, 10 years ago when people were like, we got to make this page work on a phone or a tablet. But it is interesting to see what platform people are coming from. So on this particular site that I'm at right now, everybody's coming from their desktops. So nobody's hitting this page from their phone. Nobody's hitting it from a tablet or an other device, whatever that is, web TV or whatever the kids are using these days. So that's pretty interesting. And then the other thing at the bottom that I really like is it shows not what files are shared externally, but what files that have been accessed externally. So this, we always have this worry about if data is getting out, and this is one way you can tell on your site if data is getting outside of your organization is by going to this site usage page and then looking at the bottom and seeing if anybody's come out externally. So that's, I find that interesting. Now, as Carrie alluded, there is also in the admin center, there is some reports that you can get on SharePoint, and then the tenant side, and then there's a site stuff, and that's where you see that usage stuff by individual user. And like she mentioned, it's obfuscated. It's got like it's a GUID, but it's not really a GUID. And again, I think Casper mentioned in the chat room that there's some GDPR aspects to it. I think that's probably what they're going for. But there are some knobs that you can twist and some dials and stuff that will let you expose that data, but by default, it's not exposed. One other thing that I wanted to mention is normally on this slide, I'd be talking about all the great ways that you can access this information from PowerShell and automate all these reports and export them out to spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. I couldn't find any way.
Let me guess.
Unlocking more ways.
Whoa! I couldn't find any way to do that with PowerShell, so I'm very remiss. I had to talk about the UI, which kind of hurt my heart a little bit. But as far as I can tell, there's no good way to export these things. Now, I haven't checked the Graph SDK. There might be some ways to get it that way.
There's Graph APIs.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Graph SDK is the PowerShell module.
Yes. Yep.
So I don't know if they've got it in there or not. But with the PNP or the regular SharePoint modules, there's no way to automate this stuff. So like Julie mentioned, you get this rolling 90-day thing. If you don't have some way to automate getting that stuff out every 89 days, you're going to miss stuff. So keep an eye on that.
One thing. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
One tip, you don't have to go to the gear and do site usage. You can also go to the recycle bin, and because that's an obvious place for it.
Where else would it be?
I'm sorry, not the recycle bin, site contents. And it's in the upper right of site contents, next to the recycle bin.
Next to the recycle bin,
which is what I meant.
Right.
Yeah.
What I was going to point out was, Todd, specifically around the usage, we now have the ability to target which web parts are shown in mobile.
Oh,
right. So if you're trying to optimize, if you have a predominantly mobile workforce that's looking at the screen on their phones, you can use these page analytics to tell that, and then decide which web parts get priority, which which ones you want to show or don't want to show to help optimize that load.
Yeah, and Mark Cashman mentioned in the chat room the reflow order also when it comes to that. So yeah, that's
same thing.
So there you go. That's a good usage of that information. So that thing I told you about where that's not important, scratch all that. This is very important. Respect your mobile users.
Okay, that's great. All right, let's move on to tenant usage, Mark.
All right, so we started with pages and news posts. We did site usage, and now up at the tenant level this is actually in the Microsoft 365 admin center, not the SharePoint admin center. You have statistics that go across the entire tenant, and I've highlighted the pages section in the middle there depending on which view you're looking at, activity, site usage, or storage, on the upper left, those tabs, you see pages in a different place. But that tells you sort of when are people hitting pages. And if you notice here, I've changed this to 30 days. And what that shows you is, geez, people aren't working on the weekend. Big surprise, right? So you tend to see some fairly typical sort of aggregated numbers here that go across all of the pages in the tenant, and that may or may not tell you something. If you did see a more flat look at pages, that would tell you that you're more of a 24/7 operation. So that we might have some indications on how you would manage your tenant and that sort of thing. So there are some stats there. So that you could look at across sites, across different pages, libraries, and all that sort of stuff. So making friends with your Microsoft 365 admins might be useful if you're somebody who needs to understand these stats better, and you have even an even longer time frame that you can look at, which is 180 days, which does a lot of this, which could be helpful. To the GDPR question, down at the bottom, and it's not very big, but you can see username. That section actually lists individual users and what they've been doing: files viewed, files synced, pages visited, that sort of stuff. But you see that the username here is a GUID, and that's the default. I'm almost positive is anonymized individual user information. You can change that so that you can see the actual person's name. I'm not sure that is useful unless you're monitoring someone's behavior for something nefarious or something, but just understanding what kind of activity each entity is doing is probably interesting enough. So that's the tenant level. And you notice also on the left side under reports, there are a number of other reports. In case you've never been to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, there are usage reports across many different applications. This happens to be zoomed in on SharePoint. So we're seeing more pages and files and things like that. Cool. Okay, onward.
Next slide.
So the big question I always ask when people say, but I need stats, is why? What is it you're trying to accomplish? I can't tell you how many times in the old days I would be asked to put Google Analytics in the master page, which worked great. But why? What are you going to do with these stats was always the question I would ask, because it's going to slow things down a little bit. You're going to have to analyze them. So the signals are there. You can just sort of decide which level you're going to look at them, but you can get the signals that are helpful to understand what's happening. But what are you actually going to do about it? And we've been hinting about that, or talking about that throughout all of this. But I think that's the most important conversation to have, is what are you going to do if you see like a new, Patrick was talking about news posts. If you have a news post that nobody's reading, what are you going to do about that? And so, some of the actions you might take is create content that resonates better. Maybe you can't really do A/B testing here, but you could do a news post that looks one way and a news post that looks another way, and then compare the usage over time, or readership over time. You might schedule things to go out at a different time. Tuesdays at 10 a.m. for a blog post out in the world tends to be the best time to do it, but that doesn't mean that your audience is going to be sort of trending toward the norm. So make sure you understand when people are more likely to see stuff. A lot of organizations force you to the homepage of the intranet, so everybody's there at 9 o'clock, but they probably leave at 9:01:01. And they're in there and out, and that doesn't tell you anything. It just tells you that page got loaded. So make sure you understand the perspective of what it is you're measuring and what you can get out of it. And then Todd talked a little bit about different devices. Everything in SharePoint now is responsive, but if everybody is in the field on their phone, you should think about your content differently, because it needs to be smaller. And by smaller, I mean fewer words. You need to get your points across in a different way. Writing for the web is not like writing a memo in Word. It needs to be, you need to consider your audience and make sure that you're tailoring that text to be consumed in the best way by the people who are on the devices that they're on. That'll flow nicely and it'll look nice on a phone, but that doesn't mean someone wants to scroll through some news post that's, now 75 inches tall or something like that.
And Mark, that average time spent, I think, is a good one for that, because it caught their interest enough to open it. And then if they see this really dense text kind of heavy page and come off that page, then there's some work to be done there.
Yeah, like it's sort of clickbaity in the sense that the title might have led you to come there thinking you were going to really quick get the answer to your question, but it was too dense. And you're like, I need a TLDR, get me off of here.
Right.
Going to get coffee.
And that's why we always talk about writing for the web being a different thing. You want to get your points across at the top, because a lot of people are never going to scroll down to the bottom, regardless of whether they're on a desktop or a phone. So onward.
Upward. Kick it up.
So if all of this has you going, well, yeah, that tells me some stuff, but it doesn't tell me enough. I want to measure more. I want to be able to push things to different channels. I want to be able to understand what different audiences are seeing and how they're reacting to things. And you really are going to take advantage of that. Viva Amplify is it's an upsell in a sense. You have to pay for it, but it's a SKU that helps you get much more detailed statistics and be able to manage campaigns in a much more detailed way, much more granular way, and understand, are people reading it more on a desktop? Are they reading it more on the web? Are they reading it more in Teams or SharePoint or Viva Engage? I knew there was something I was forgetting, because you can push the same content to these different channels using Amplify. So I've worked with a couple of clients who use Viva Amplify, and they tend to see much richer information about what people are actually paying attention to, and it's worth it if you have somebody who's going to spend that time. So like I said, what that lets you do is push to multiple channels: SharePoint, Teams, Outlook, and Viva Engage. So you can push the same content to the same place. On some level, news will show up in email if somebody hasn't viewed it, but this is much more of a push mechanism. And then you get to see things like, well, what percentage of my audience is actually consuming this stuff? You can learn much more detail, as you can see on this slide, and trends over time. So people use it for all sorts of things. They use it for training material. They use it for things like news posts. But you think about the idea of a campaign. You tend to build multiple communication mechanisms or communication events into a campaign. And that campaign is sort of like what you would do on an external site, where you're trying to get somebody to go from point A to point B to point C. You're trying to close something, that kind of campaign, except that this is about content inside your tenant. So that can be a cool thing to look at if you want to go an extra notch up.
In the chat, Karen posted a fairly long thing, but in summary, the TLDR is she was talking about the fact that we used to have better analytics, and if we had the sort of Google Analytics type thing that we used to have, you are able to sort of get trends across pages and see how people are navigating through things and how powerful that can be. And she's 100% right. That's absolutely true. But what I think is different here is that, as Karen's stating, she has a clear plan for that data. Like, she's seeing how she can collect that data together, see trends, understand how people are using things, and then apply it in a way that will make the implementation better for people. I think what is maybe not as great as if you're like, oh, just add Google Analytics to every page or whatever it is, and then you don't use that data. Now you're just adding overhead to the page for no benefit to your organization. So if you've got a real strategy and you know how to use the data, I'm here for it. And as I said to her in the chat, you absolutely can still do it through a very simple, very, very simple customization.
Yeah, I think,
maybe this clarify.
I think clarity is really that next another level up, which we didn't want to talk about today because we had to cover a bunch of other stuff. But clarity is Microsoft's Google Analytics in this sense, and it gets you a lot of information like you would want from a real tracking tool.
Yeah. So I think that is definitely the next on that. All right. Well, cool. We covered almost everything, and I didn't have my mouse in the right page to click the next button. All right. Resources, we've got them for you. You can click on them. They'll be on the YouTube video and on our page on our Simpraxis site later if you need them some other time. Join us next for September 17th. We're going to do Microsoft Teams channels, which to use when. And so that'll be an interesting conversation because we have strong feelings on that. See us live, Experts Live, New York City. Mark and I will be there October 10th. And then right after that, the following week is Collab Days New England. If you are in the New England area, please sign up. Registration is open. Sponsors are pretty done. I think we're full on sponsors. I'm
never going to say no if somebody wants to give us money.
Yes, right. But we've got a full contingent of table sponsors, and so things are rocking there. Registration is open. Get on board. Join us for that October 17th. Patrick and Todd are going to present too, which is great. And then Mark and I, will be in TechCon 365 in Dallas in November, and we've got 100% off if you use code Simpraxis. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. As always, we'll see you in a couple of weeks for Microsoft Teams channels. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on Ask Simpraxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. You can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues.